to India and Ireland, round Africa and back again. We don't really need to know just where we'll go. Maybe Canada, then to Brazil, then through the Alpine foothills. All I really want to know is, can we go? Oh baby, can we go? Round and around the globe.
Welcome to Take Me With You, episode 32. I'm Ryan,
And I'm Cheryl. We are two well-traveled people who want to go everywhere.
but that's not going to happen. So instead, we'll travel vicariously by inviting a guest to share their unique travel stories with us.
This summer, we are going to do a little series of travel tips episodes with just Ryan and myself. And today,
No
we're going to talk.
guest.
Yeah, no guess at all. And today, we're going to start it off by talking about packing light.
Yes. I think we have talked about this many, many times already on the podcast, haven't we, Cheryl?
Yeah, that's true. It's just kind of one of the overarching themes that we like to talk about. And it's a fun thing to hear what our guests have shared so far about their thoughts on packing. And so we're going to do 9 episodes of travel tips. And
Not all on packing.
not all unpacking. Only 2 of them are unpacking. Thank you very much. And and so we thought we might as well start off with a subject matter that we've already kind of been talking about. And so
Yeah. And so, Cheryl, since we've already mentioned things about this, we've asked our guests, we've shared things. Like, why is it worthwhile to go ahead and do a whole episode just on packing? Why is it that important?
well, I mean, I think for just like organization on our podcast, it's nice if people feel like they've heard tips here and there, maybe to hear it all compiled in one location.
Sure.
Would be helpful. But I think just like for me, it sets me up for success when I pack light on a trip. And then
Yeah.
the whole trip, I'm like, this was awesome. And
Yeah.
I think of very few times that I regretted not bringing something, and many
Yeah.
more times when I've regretted bringing something.
Yeah. I think for me, packing is one of those things where when you do it well, you don't think about it on your trip. But when you
Yeah.
don't do it well, you think about it almost every day.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have to think about that while you're going from city to city or place to place or on the plane and off the plane or whatever your transportation has to be, and the packing is not something that's on your mind, I think that is so much nicer. And it makes it worthwhile to spend the time up front to talk about how to pack well and the importance of packing light to make the actual travel experience that much more enjoyable, so you can be there and not have to worry about all the packing stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So the next episode, we are going to talk about our packing list. And the reason we're bringing that up at the start of this episode is because one of the pieces of advice, if you want to pack light, is to use a packing list. So why would that be?
Well, without going into too much detail, since we'll do that in our next episode, the thing about using a packing list is, for me, twofold. One, you don't forget something that you really should have. But then 2, you don't pack something that you really don't need. And so it keeps you from just looking around your room or whatever and just go, oh, and I need one of those and I need 6 of these and whatever, because you've already figured out what you need. And then you can just look at that list and then you have that confidence that this is what I need without saying, oh, and I should throw this in, and oh, and I should throw this in. And especially if you use a list from trip to trip, if you've never noticed that, oh, gee, I wish I had whatever it is, and it's never been on your list, you probably won't need it this time either.
That's so true. Yeah. And then I think for me, I think a lot about outfits when I'm traveling. And so
I could see that you would.
Yeah. So
I do not.
The list helps me not overpack my clothes is really a big thing. Is like really processing how many shirts do I really want on this trip, and then not just adding like, well, this one's also cute and this one goes good with these shoes and all these other things. It's just like,
yeah.
No, I I said this is how many shirts I'm bringing, and so that's how many I'm going to bring. So just kind of that helps a lot with not overpacking with that too.
Yeah. So we'll go into a whole lot more detail, including giving our packing lists.
Yes.
In the next episode. But for now, beyond using a packing list, what are some of the strategies that you use, Cheryl, to pack light?
So one thing I do is I start with what suitcase or backpack or whatever I want to bring, and then I just decide like this is what I'm bringing, and I'm just not going to bring more stuff than fits in here.
Yeah.
So I don't start with the stuff. I start with like on this trip, I want to wear this backpack around because it makes the most sense with this trip. So I'm just going to bring stuff that fits in this backpack.
Yep. Well, and I think that is a real important point, that the bag or backpack or whatever suitcase that you end up taking and its size will have a very strong impact on the amount of stuff that you bring. And I don't know, I haven't seen any research directly related to packing and bag size, but some other things that are very similar that I've definitely seen research around is how psychologically we tend to fill the space that we have. So like I just moved out of my condo, for example, and moved from a 2-bedroom condo into a 1-room that I'm renting out with in a friend's house. And boy, do I have a lot of stuff. And I've definitely heard before. And you also recently moved, Cheryl.
Yeah.
And so I know that we tend to fill the space that we have. So that happens in our homes where we live, and you had a tiny house.
Yeah.
So that I'm sure helped you kind of cut down and reduce the amount of stuff that you had. I've definitely seen it even when it comes to food. And we tend to eat more food if we have a bigger container. And they've even done studies. I think they did one with like soup, where they had these soup bowls that actually had like tubes attached underneath them. And so as people were eating, they would actually slowly refill the soup. And then they were measuring the amount that people ate. And people ate more when there was more left in the bowl. So it wasn't about eating a certain amount of food or feeling full. It was about the amount that was left for when they were going to stop. So we just psychologically were programmed to fill space that we have, or empty space, I suppose, in the case of like the soup. But so that's, I think, a really big, important point. So if you would like to be like, okay, I want to do all carry on, which I would encourage people for any trip that you're doing. If you're flying, if you can do all carry on, it makes your life so much easier.
Yeah.
So, but in order to do that, the only bags that you can consider are carry-on size bags.
Yeah. Yeah.
If
That's
you start,
really true.
like you said, if you start with the amount of stuff that you have and then try and see what bag it'll fit in, you're going to be less likely to meet your goal that way.
Yeah. And I guess it is the opposite of if you've ever done home organization, the advice is see what stuff you're trying to organize before you go out and buy like a bunch of bins and containers for it, because maybe it's not even for what you need. But I would say this is a totally different mindset than that. This is like, I mean, I think both of us kind of have more of the philosophy of like, what's the bare minimum?
Yeah.
We're not quite the bare minimum, but being pretty minimal with what we're bringing when we're going to be traveling.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're probably more of a minimalist than I am.
Just in life?
Yes, but even in travel, because I definitely have that tendency of like, ooh, but what if I need X, right? Like I like to be prepared. And so I think it takes more intentionality on my part to say no to bringing something than I think it may be for you, except for, based on what you just said,
Clothes.
like outfits for you.
Yes.
Clothes for me, like, I don't care. I can wear the same t-shirt 3 times as long as it doesn't smell. That doesn't bother me, right? Like, that's not a big deal. And I don't, as just a general life philosophy, I don't own things that I couldn't wear together, because I don't want to have to think about what matches. So only buy things that match.
Wow, that's very trendy of you or not. I don't even know trendy, but
I don't think it's trendy.
That's something that a lot of fashion people advise anyways, to kind
really?
of have. Yeah.
Well,
Gotta
I mean,
have like a look to your wardrobe and everything.
but it's purely out of laziness because it's like when I grab like to get ready for work in the morning, I don't want to have to think because I am not a morning person. I don't have to think about what shirt goes with what pair of pants. So I just have a whole bunch of khaki pants and a whole bunch of button ups that will go with all my khakis.
That's actually a piece of fashion advice is to do that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
I did it out of laziness.
there you
so.
go. But I
mean,
would say
it's because of my intentional fashion sense.
yeah, it totally is. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I saw you at Paris Fashion Week. I know.
That was definitely me. Yeah.
So this we're going to have a few things that are kind of going to blend between packing light and packing lists. But I would say on the packing light side of that, well, what we were just talking about, definitely bringing clothes that all go together will help you feel, I think, more satisfied with packing less clothes.
Yep.
Because then you can, like, as a woman, I think about, like, I can wear this dress with that sweater over it, or these shoes, or this shirt with this thing. You can pair these different things you have in different ways to kind of feel like you're wearing some fresh outfits and everything. Or, like, for me, honestly, I do care about the pictures that, you know, because I'm going to take a lot of pictures while I'm traveling. And so I care about kind of having some variety there. But really, I really make sure in order to not overpack my clothes and get the most use out of my clothes, I make sure that everything goes together and that all my shoes, if I'm even bringing more than one pair of shoes, go with everything too.
Yeah.
And so that's like everything I could wear could all go together, and that's nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, but the philosophy behind some of the clothes stuff is also like, do you even need to bring more than one pair of shoes? And not because they're cute or anything, but like I think thinking about the activities that you're going to be doing, and like if you're going to the beach, then that would be a reason, like, okay, then maybe you want walking shoes and sandals. So that's 2 pairs. If you're going to something where there really is like formal stuff, you know, if you actually need to like be dressed up for something, maybe, but even that, I would say like all my nice looking shoes.
Cheat.
Yeah, all my nice looking shoes are also walking shoes. So I have like a really nice pair of black flats that are Clark's, I believe. And they're just really good walking shoes. And so I wore them all over Spain one time, you know.
Yeah.
And then also I could wear them to a really nice event. And they're flats, so they could be in warmer weather or colder weather. So I think there are things that it's like, instead of wearing, it's kind of different than your day-to-day life where maybe you're wearing different shoes on different days. It's like, what I would say, go way more all-purpose, and then you can bring less, because shoes take up so much space.
They do. I mean, that kind of reminds me. So when I went to the Galapagos, because we were hiking, and like they had provided a suggested packing list and things, and there were certain hikes, and having never been there before, they were like, okay, so these are like easy, and then these are medium, and then these are strenuous. And I was like, ooh, strenuous. They're like, oh, you definitely want, you know, a good pair of hiking shoes. I'm like, okay, well, those are big. And I knew I wanted sandals because I was also we were going to be on beaches and in the water. So I was like, well, I've got at least those 2. I was like, but I don't really want to fly with my big hiking boots on. So that one thing I could have done, right, was fly with my hiking boots.
Yep.
I definitely could have. And I thought about it. But as far as my own comfort level, because they're high tops, and those are not generally as comfortable for me because of just my feet or whatever. So I cheated again, and then I didn't actually pack them. I tied the shoelaces together and then slung them over one of my backpack straps. Nice. So they were like hanging down and then banging against me. But like, it wasn't that big of a deal. I also happened to know, because I was going on the cruise, I was going to be on the cruise ship most of the time. So if I was going to be like hiking around Europe, that would have been a different deal.
Yep.
Right? Because if I'm going from place to place to place to place, that's going to get annoying and in the way. But I knew that it was for a short period of time, and I wasn't going to be like unpacking every day or 2. So I was like, well, I was willing to do that. And that's one of the things that I've heard from a couple of different travel people is like, sometimes it actually helps if you're like, okay, I'm going to be real strict about all these things, and then this is my one splurge pack. You know, like I'm going to let myself, it may not be practical, but I'm going to let myself bring this one thing that isn't practical, nothing else. And so I have to pick intentionally what that one thing is.
Yeah.
So
I like that idea. That's really creative. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and part of the packing light might also be like maybe you don't bring the hiking boots, maybe you just bring tennis shoes and
Yeah.
they're slightly less ideal for the hike, but overall on the trip it's just better to wear the tennis shoes.
Yep.
And then definitely I like what you said about considering wearing them on the airplane, because I think that's the best thing is like, especially if you're going somewhere where it's colder, wear
Mhm.
all of your bulkiest stuff. And I mean,
Yep.
even you can take it off on the airplane if you want to, but like one time when I went to Europe a couple years ago, I really wanted to wear tall black boots, like that go up to the calf
Mhm.
and everything. And I got ones that were really good walking shoes. And I was like, I think they were the only pair of shoes I brought because it was going to be kind of cool the whole time I was there.
Mm.
And or maybe I brought flats as well. But yeah, I wore them on the plane. So like
Yeah.
big black boots, I'm not going to normally be like, yeah, this is to take up like half of my suitcase.
Right.
But
Right.
if I wear them, then that's fine. And then I wore my jacket and my sweater
Mhm.
and then bought a scarf on the trip and wore it on the way home. And so I think that's the other thing is just like, if you're like, I really want to bring this bulky thing, then figure out if you could wear it while you're doing the travel parts.
Yep. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the whole jacket and sweater thing, because that's another thing that I definitely do, flying anyway, is, I will wear the jacket. It helps that we live in Seattle and it's often a little bit cooler weather here than it is wherever I'm going. Not always. When I went to Iceland, it was definitely colder there than it was here. But, so it's not usually as awkward or uncomfortable to be wearing those things here as maybe if you like lived in LA or Texas or something like that, you maybe wouldn't be wearing it quite as often. But that being said, the plane temperature is so fickle that I often want a jacket or a sweatshirt or something on the plane anyway, because it can get too cold or it can get too hot. And so I want to adjust that stuff on the plane anyway. So it just makes sense to wear those things. And then, like you said, you can take them off. You can stuff them in the overhead bin. You can put them, in this underneath the seat in front of you. You can even just take them off and like leave them at your seat, wrapped around you if you need to. And now it's not taking up space in your luggage.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think I'm trying to think of other key things that I think about with packing light.
I'm going to say this again, and I know that I've said this on multiple podcast episodes. Use packing cubes.
Mm-hmm.
It's so, it may or may not be directly for packing light, but it definitely helps the entire packing experience because it helps me as someone who likes to be organized stay so much more organized. You can get compression cubes. So you can get cubes that you can also zip. They have a zip around so that they actually can be a little bit smaller. That may or may not be a great option just because then you may think about bringing more than you really need to bring. And yes, there's the amount of space, but there's also the weight to consider.
Yeah, that's a good point. Mm-hmm.
So both just for what you're willing to carry, either on your back or in your arms or both. But then also a lot of airlines now have weight limits. I think they all technically have weight limits on carry-on bags, but I have multiple times. These have all been on flights to Europe and international flights, but I've actually seen airline personnel go around and actually weigh carry-on bags. So not just like when you check. Oh yeah, I've seen it multiple times.
Wow.
So
interesting.
Yeah, if you've got a big, huge flight and you know that it's full and people are trying to avoid checking bags.
Yeah.
There, in addition to the space, the weight also matters on a plane. So
yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
And then earlier we were talking about choosing a suitcase, and one thing that I was just thinking about is if you are taking any like I think about some of the airlines in Europe, so not like from here to Europe, but like within Europe. Some of the measurements for what they consider carry-on are going to be different, or
smaller.
That might be true on trains. I think trains in general are a little more chill, so that's fine. But so I would say it's also important when choosing a carry-on, if you're really trying to go for a carry-on, is to look up those measurements.
Yep.
And in fact, when I bought my newest suitcase, I think a little less than a year ago, I looked up those measurements because I really wanted one that was those ones, because then that would be the most versatile for me. Like one time my sister and I took a trip and we did a plane from Venice to Barcelona.
Okay.
And she had to check her bag on that part of the trip, even though she could carry her bag on when she came from the States to Italy and from Spain back to the States.
Yep. And typically, if you're doing any of those smaller European airlines, especially the discount airlines like Ryanair or EasyJet or any of those, which are great if you're going in Europe because they're not very expensive. But they do generally have a lot more restrictive requirements for carry-ons and for checked bags. Yeah,
absolutely. So that's a good thing to consider. For me, also, my toiletries can take up some space. So I do try to pare those down. Definitely even bringing like the small, and the liquids restrictions kind of helps that anyway.
Yeah.
And so some of it I'll touch on a little bit more in the next episode about packing, or our packing lists. For the packing light, I think just really thinking through like, what hair products do I normally use? What makeup do I normally use? Things like that. Again, kind of like at home, what am I going to use versus like on a trip where like I still want my hair and makeup to look nice. So I'm not just going to say I'm not going to do anything, but then also thinking through like, what's the small version of one of any of those things, or what's the extra thing that like I sometimes use, but I could do without, or anything like that. And so, and really any travel version of anything can be really nice. And then, so I would say that that's another good thing to think about.
If you want to be more adventurous, you can travel without most of those things and just buy them in the country when you get there. I haven't done that 100%, but I did have two different experiences when I was in Switzerland. So one was I went on, I think I may have talked about this on the very first episode when I talked about my trip to Switzerland, but I did sort of a kind of a self-guided walking tour. And for whatever reason, the shoes that I had or the way it was not great. And so I ended up getting some blisters on my heels. And I was like, well, and that's not uncommon for me if I'm in not the right pair of shoes. And so I was like, oh, I need some Band-Aids. Definitely didn't have any Band-Aids with me. So I got to go and figure out how to find, at the chemist or the pharmacist, it's like the drugstore. And I already knew what that symbol is, like it's a green plus sign. And went in there and found some Band-Aids, and that worked out just fine. Awesome. I also then left half of my toiletries at one of my Airbnbs. Oops. So I had to go get some replacements. And you know what? It was fine. I survived. It's not like it's super expensive. You can get the small sized ones there as well. I mean, obviously, if you're going to go, on a 3-month backpacking trip through the Amazon, you would need to do something a little bit different because you wouldn't be able to, buy that stuff. But most of the trips that I think most of us are going on are not that trip. Yeah.
Well, or another way to kind of do a mashup of that is if you're going to be gone for a while, maybe bring like one of the little toothpaste. So like the first little bit of time when you're there and getting adjusted, you already kind of have what you need, but then go buy one once you're out of it, or something like that. Or, if you're ever staying with people, ask them what they have that you can use. That is going to be a huge thing that like, if I ever go visit people, I'm texting them or emailing them ahead of time, like, hey, can I use your shampoo? Can I use this? Can I use that? Like what are all of the things that I can skip on bringing because they already have it in their house?
Right.
And that
or if you're
traveling,
if you're staying in hotels, which I would encourage you to not stay exclusively in hotels, but if you are, they often will provide, the little travel size things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you are welcome to take those when you leave. So maybe you stay in a hotel first, and that's where you get your shampoo and your soap and your conditioner, and then you use those for the rest of your trip. And then again, you don't have to bring them.
That's a great idea. Yeah. I like that as well. Yeah, so I think those are some ways to save space. I think I've mentioned this before, but I have a collapsible water bottle. So I'm a fan of that. There's a couple different kinds that you can get there. I think they're becoming more common now, but they take up very little space. And then really as kind of a self-care thing, I really like to have the option of like having water on me when I
Yeah.
want it and everything. And so,
Yep.
and depending on where you're traveling to, depends on if public water is like a good option or if you have to buy it everywhere. And
Yep.
so having, and Ryan, I mean, you also bring a water bottle. You just bring like a standard.
Yeah. I mean, they're not
one.
cheap. I mean, they're not expensive. I don't have like a hydro flask or anything fancy pants like that. But yeah, they're the hard plastic ones just because those are the ones that I have.
Yeah.
And I can refill them as many times as I need to. And yeah, my backpack that I pretty much always travel with a backpack has, it actually has like 2 of the little water pouch things on the side. So it makes it easy. So it's not taking up space inside my bag, but I'm also not having to carry it, which is nice.
My collapsible one has a carabiner attached to it, so that's kind of nice. And that's common on a lot of water bottles, is just to have something, because then, like you're saying, not taking up space in the suitcase is really nice there.
Yeah.
So, another thing I would suggest is some sort of e-reader. I have just a classic Kindle, and I think that's really nice, like not being able, not having to bring books, that take up space, but it's really nice being able to have reading material. So I'd say that's a good thing.
And I'll talk more about some of that stuff when we talk about our packing lists in our next one, about like what things do I decide to bring and not decide to bring as far as in-flight entertainment, shall we say, and on-trip entertainment, because I definitely have some strategies that I as an individual use and some things like that. But yeah, I think that's good. I think also, because you had talked about, the size of suitcase, I think also deciding the type of suitcase that you want to be traveling with. Again, depending on, are you going to be going to a bunch of different cities? Are you going to be packing and unpacking a lot? Do you want to have a backpack so that you can have your hands free? Would you prefer to have a rolling bags are very, very popular.
Yeah.
But are you okay if you have to, depending on where you are, can you pick it up and can you carry it? Like that should kind of always be your gauge, especially, if you're traveling to Europe, or I would say at least the places that I've been in South America, because things are not as big outside the US as they often are in the US. And that includes elevators, that includes stairs, that includes buildings, that includes hotel rooms, like all of those things. Yeah. And you can't always easily wheel things around. And so if you have to, could you pick up all of your luggage and carry it yourself? If the answer is no, you have too much.
Yeah. Yep. I would totally agree with that. Yeah, that's a very good standard to have there, or way to judge that.
Are you an all backpack person?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not.
No,
either.
I'm not. So the last time I went to Spain in the fall, the episode or the trip that I shared about early on in this show, I did my little wheelie, and it's one that is the measurements that I talked about. It could fit on any airline, and it's hard-sided, and it has the 4 wheels. And
is it one of the spinners?
Yeah. So I actually most of the time did not drag it behind me, but I wheeled it next to me. And that worked super great. So in that case I liked that. What I love about my backpack, because I brought my backpack on a lot of trips. I brought it on like little weekend trips to Southern California. I brought it to Europe for 2 weeks. I brought it to Europe a couple times, and what I love about it is it fits in front of the seat. Which means I am not part of the madness of trying to get to my seat very quickly.
Yep.
And I don't need any overhead space. And there's something really nice about that. And part of that is because I don't care about the leg room. I know for you would always choose the overhead space, even if you had something that would fit under your seat.
Actually, no. This is part of my issue. This is why when we talked about like what my splurge was early on, in one of the early episodes, I think, of the podcast.
Oh,
and I splurge for the upgraded seat that has more legroom, because I actually like to have my backpack in the seat in front of me so I can get to all my stuff. So I don't have to get up and access the overhead bin.
Yeah, it's really nice.
But then it does mean that legroom is more of an issue. But for the most part, even if my backpack isn't there, the legroom is still an issue. So unless I get, the seat that has more legroom.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think we should address some reasons that people would not pack super light. Like, what would be some,
Like,
you know what I mean?
why we would recommend them not to, or objections people would have, and then we would respond to them.
Maybe the objections. And some of them I would say are probably valid. I think it probably depends. So, yeah. So can you think, what objections have you heard?
Objections that I've heard to packing light. I think one of them could be, I don't have time.
Okay.
Right. Like I'm packing at the last minute and I'm just throwing stuff in. I don't have time to like think through what to bring or what not to bring. I just need to bring stuff and I just need to go.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
How would you respond to that?
Make a list.
Uh-huh. Or
chip
start
away at
earlier.
it would
Yeah.
be another thing.
Yeah.
Like I will sometimes start packing a couple weeks before my trip in small ways,
Yeah.
starting to gather the things so I can start evaluating, maybe I don't have the travel size of this particular item and I need to go to the store and get a new one of it or,
Mhm.
some things like that. And then also have it it's not a good response. So I don't have time to say take the time to do it. But if you do take the time to do it, really looking at your things and evaluating, do I truly want to bring all of this?
Right.
Because I actually do take probably a lot of time to pack because I do that evaluation
Mm.
part and really think through. And then sometimes even if it's on my list, I'll end up cutting it. And so,
Yeah.
that'll be one.
I agree. And I think we've talked about this before in passing, but one of the things that I've come to the realization of, because I'm such a literal person, when we say packing, I actually interpret that as physically putting things in a suitcase. But if we talk about packing as in the process of determining all the things to bring, getting all the things to bring, gathering them up together, organizing them, and putting them in the suitcase, then I'm with you, and I start that probably a week, maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks before I leave. Because I'm thinking about it in the back of my mind. I'm adding things to my packing list. I'm checking my packing list. I'm making a shopping list for the things I don't have. And I do, kind of like you mentioned, oftentimes it's like, okay, this is a thing that I don't necessarily use all the time or whatever. Like there's some things like my backpack. I don't bring my backpack with me everywhere I go. Right. Or there's certain things that I would travel with. Like I've got a little USB stick that has movies on it for the plane. Right. I don't bring that with me everywhere I go, but I want to make sure that I have that with me. So I do start like usually a little pile and I'll start putting things that I'm not going to access every day. So it's not usually clothes unless there's like some unique special clothes that I'm bringing that I wouldn't normally wear. And if I have those, but yeah, I'll start a little pile and in the past, I've not called that packing because I'm not putting it in the suitcase, but it is part of the packing process.
For sure. Yeah. An objection that I have heard is that it's overwhelming or like, I don't know how to do it. I don't know where to start. You know what I mean? Just kind of like being like out of someone's comfort zone or seemingly their abilities.
Yeah.
How would you respond to that?
I would have two responses to that. The first one would be get a packing list. So if we're not plugging our next episode well enough, there you go. It's kind of important. That's why we're going to do a whole episode on it. But then the other suggestion that I would say would be get a buddy. Get a packing buddy, like someone who has done it before or also is interested in doing it. Maybe they haven't done it before, but you guys are going on a trip together and you guys can help kind of, in a sense, keep each other accountable or help think about things creatively about it. Like I've definitely done that as I've continued to refine my packing to try and be more efficient with it, like asking other people. I think I've asked you before, hey, how do you do, this thing with packing? And like when you got your new suitcase, I was like, what does your suitcase look like? I think you and I offline have talked about my quest for the perfect backpack that I still have yet to get, but I'm getting closer. So like I'm constantly on the lookout for those things, but it's asking other people who've done the work and done the research, I think. How would you respond to that?
I would say similar with the buddy thing, but what I have offered to friends, I have yet to have anyone take me up on this, and this has been a 100% sincere offer I've given to so many people, is like, invite me over to your house while you're packing. And I'm going to be harsh, but I'm going to get the job done. And, but I think it's a similar thing to like, okay, so I like clothes. There's times when I'm like, oh, I have too many clothes in my life. And I do not have that filter to decide like, I don't need this. But someone else can come in and say like,
much more objectively.
When is the last time you wore it? You know what I mean? All of those key things. And that could be true with any stuff, is just someone who's outside of the situation can help you pare down your stuff. And I think it's kind of the same with packing, is just like invite over a friend when you're packing and be like, hey, help me out. You know, what can I cut? Yeah. You know, and then they could say like, these clothes don't even look good together. Don't bring them both, you know, or you know, whatever it is, or like, is this practical for the weather? Or like, do you really need the 3 pairs of shoes? Or, you know, to have somebody else who's a little, like you said, looking at it more objectively, I would say would help. And so, you know, anyone could call in to this podcast too, and we would happily help them. Or
that's true. So, we would be more than happy to help someone think that through or process through. You want to send us pictures. You could, you know, send us pictures of, hey, here's what my bag looks like. Here's all my stuff spread out on my bed or on my floor. What should I take out?
Yeah.
And we can offer that.
Oh, for sure. I'd be so down with that. Yeah. Okay. And then my sister brought up an objection to packing super light that I think is really valid. So I'm interested to talk about it. So she is plus sized. And when she went to Japan, which actually she shared about on this podcast, she was like, sure, a common piece of advice is you don't overpack your clothes. And if you really need it, you can buy something. And she was like, I couldn't. She was like, honestly, if I had tried to buy something in Japan, they just wouldn't have my size. And absolutely valid. And so I'm curious then, what would be your response to that? Because that's pretty legit.
No, that is legit. I think in a circumstance like that, well, first of all, there's 2 choices. Do you still want to try and pack light? Or is it like that is just too much of an added stress because there isn't that fail safe of like, while I'm there, I can buy something if I need it. If you do still want to, if you don't want to, I personally would not push someone to be, no, you should make that happen. You know, like you have to do something that you're comfortable with so that you're not stressed the entire time that you're traveling. It does mean that you're probably checking a bag and things are going to be a little bit slower and more cumbersome. But if that is an acceptable trade-off for you, you know, that's definitely your choice. The other thing that I would think through would be, I think a lot of the same strategies that you're talking about still would apply. As far as like bringing things that all match and things that can layer, and you know, a lot of those things I think could still apply. And then maybe it means maybe the clothes, like I mentioned, let's splurge. Maybe the clothes are the splurge, you know, and maybe some of the other things like the toiletries or hair dryer. Like, I don't know what all of those things are that people travel with necessarily, because I pretty much just don't pay attention to those things. You know, but maybe some of those things would be where you would kind of cut back to kind of compensate for it instead. I don't know. What's your thought?
I guess my thought would be then at that point, what does backup items look like, and how could they still be used if a piece of clothing was like ripped or damaged, or you know, something happened that was kind of beyond repair? I would say part of it also might just be bring, you know, like the Tide stick or the shout wipes or something, where like if you got like something on your clothes that you could clean it yourself, and then bring maybe a little sewing kit so that if something, you know, got damaged within reason, you know, to be able to mend it. And then maybe that's like, normally we would say just bring 1 pair of jeans, you know, because jeans you can just keep wearing and keep wearing, and it's great. And so maybe that's like, oh, but what if those jeans rip and then I don't have any? So then maybe that's bring some leggings that would also go with the clothing that you're packed, take up a lot less space, and then, you know, and still could be worn on the trip. And then maybe they become the only pair of pants if, you know, if the jeans like get ripped or something like that. I would say it would still be an argument to try to do a checked bag, because if carry-ons get lost, then all of a sudden you have no clothes.
Sure.
And so that would be a reason to try to do the carry-on. Did I
mean,
flip
if the
those?
checked bag gets lost, that yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. I was a little confused there for a minute. I was like,
Yeah.
why would you? I think you'd be more likely to lose a check bag than you would your carry-on, but that's because that's what you meant. Okay, got it.
So yeah, I think that
Yeah.
that is a difficult one that's much more of like a valid argument.
Yeah, for sure.
But I would say just maybe thinking about what do those backups look
Yeah.
like,
And I think
everything.
that also brings up one more kind of packing philosophy for packing light that, again, we've referenced before. And I think we're going to do a future episode on this summer during our packing tips, which is plan to do some laundry on your trip. So don't pack oftentimes when I've gone to camp in Slovenia or Croatia, my whole trip, I'm gone for 2 weeks. And so I don't bring 2 weeks worth of clothes.
Yeah.
Because that's a
Absolutely.
whole lot of clothes.
Yeah.
Right? Or this summer, I'm going to be essentially gone for about 4 weeks, for about a month. Technically, I'll be home for about 24 hours in the middle. But again, not planning to bring 4 weeks worth of clothes.
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
nor am I planning to wear the same 3 shirts for 4 weeks straight.
hmm Yeah, that happy medium
Yeah.
is good. Yeah, so I think the laundry piece will really help with packing light is doing that. I also think thinking about the fabrics that you're bringing and how
Yeah.
much space things take up. Because if you think about a blouse compared to a sweater, or things like that.
Yeah, those are the things I usually think about.
Yeah.
Blouses versus sweaters. Valid point. Yep, I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, Ryan, you should wear more blouses. And less
I
sweaters.
don't bring blouses with me. They're not on my packing list.
But I think if you just fold an article of clothing and look at it compared to another one folded,
Yeah.
and just look at which takes up less
Yep.
space.
But even then, I mean, and I know I've mentioned this before, but along with the packing cubes, roll. You got to roll your clothes. They take up less space
yeah,
if you
that's
roll
very
them.
true. Yeah,
And supposedly they get wrinkled less. I don't know that I notice a huge difference, but I'm also not incredibly fastidious on my rolling.
Sure, yeah,
I just,
Yeah.
But they do. They take up less space. You can fit more
Yeah.
stuff. And then, like you said, with the fabrics that you pick, if you pick fabrics that are thinner and lighter, and you can get any more with, they've got a lot of the merino wool that they've gotten pretty thin, which usually you
Yeah.
don't think of wool as being something that you would wear when it's warm, but they actually can keep you cool as well as keeping you warm. They kind of do that reverse insulation thing. And so a lot of the merino wool can be really good. There's some synthetic materials that dry real fast, and are way lighter weight. So either that means you can fit 1 or 2 more, or you can take fewer of them, or some combination thereof. So yeah, I think all those things factor in.
cool. Final thoughts?
Final thoughts. It is worth packing light, but you don't have to be an expert from the start. I feel like I am still improving my packing, and I've been traveling to Europe, for 15 years, something like that. Not regularly, I guess 10. So, but yeah.
I like it. Mine would be at the end of the trip, while your memory is fresh, look at your packing list and see what you didn't use.
Yeah.
Because in 2 years, when you pull up that list again, you're not necessarily going to remember all those things. But while your memory is it's still it just happened and everything.
Yep.
And then make edits on that list.
That is a great strategy that I do not do, and then backs up what I just said. I need to continue to learn and improve. Thank you for that, Cheryl.
There we go. Absolutely.
All right. Well, we are going to continue talking about packing in the next episode. Like we said, we're going to talk about packing lists. We'll give you some examples of what those are. So if that's something that you think would be helpful, then tune in again next week. But we are not done with this week's episode. We are still going to do a Wish You Were Here before we're done here today. So in case you're new to us, a Wish You Were Here, think of it kind of like a little postcard with a little snapshot of one attraction or travel site or something that we've been to that we thought was really cool that we'd like to share about. And then we'd say, hey, wish you were here. So Cheryl, what is your Wish You Were Here for this week?
So mine is in Florence, Italy, and it is
someplace I have not been yet.
It's the Duomo. Duomo? Duomo.
Duomo?
Duomo. I bet you're right. You probably are right. Which I think means dome. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, I guess that would make sense.
It is the cathedral that's in Florence.
Okay.
And it is just oh my gosh, it's just a gorgeous building. And part of what's fun about the building is like the outside is, even a piece of the outside is really beautiful. So like when you look at the whole thing, it's a really gorgeous building with this big dome like you see all over Italy. But then even if you were to just stand up against the wall and like have a photo right there, like it's just, it has really gorgeous like pattern on it, and it's just a really impressive cathedral. But part of what's really fun is that you can climb the dome, and you get this.
Now, when you say
gorgeous
climb
view
the
of
dome,
city.
I don't think you mean like on the outside you're climbing up the curved part.
Correct.
Okay.
You can climb on the inside.
So it's like climbing to the dome? Or you're actually climbing the dome itself?
Yeah, you actually get to climb like the curved part.
Oh,
and
how do you do that? From the inside?
Yeah, so it's kind of like there's a double wall, I guess, and there's like a staircase. So there's like, how do I describe this? There's a ceiling that you can see from the inside.
Yeah.
Then there's a staircase. Then there's the roof that you can see from the outside.
Okay.
So the staircase goes around the curved dome, like it spirals.
But it's got to be like slanted inwards, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be a little
It
creepy.
Sure is. It's weird, and it is such a unique experience. And then you get to go out like on the rooftop. There's a little point on the top of the dome, and there's like a viewing deck up there that you can go out on and view the city.
Oh, that's
cool. And it's a gorgeous city, and all the buildings are like the similar color scheme, and you can see the river, and it's really pretty. And it just the building itself just like stands out amongst the city, which is really cool. It's really tall. But climbing on the inside of a dome is a very unique experience. I would say it's not really a heights issue because you can't really see down while you're going. You're just going on a staircase.
Oh, so it's like internal, like in like a narrow wall hallway.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's less scary then.
Yeah, for sure. I think so. On the same trip that I did this, I also got to climb. Oh, why am I blanking on the name? St. Paul's in the Vatican. Is that what it's called?
I
in
haven't
Rome.
been there. I don't know.
But you know the Vatican, there's the big. Yeah, I got to climb that dome like days before I climbed this one.
Oh, okay.
And they're slightly different. And so both of them have that like internal staircase thing though.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of blending them in mind and I'm forgetting which exactly is like which. But they're both staircases. You go all the way to the top and get to like be on the top of the dome, which is really cool. There is a part in one of the two of them where the staircase just goes directly in towards the point.
Oh.
And so then it's a weird, like, rounded staircase, but you can see the curve and you can see along the side of it, which is, like, very odd. It's a very odd experience, but it's really fun. And there are parts where there's little windows and you can look out. There's a part where you can look down, like, on the inside of the dome.
Interesting.
And so it's so cool. Yeah, it's really fun. I would say climb the Duomo. It's a good time. Yep.
Okay. Well, the Duomo and then also just Florence in general is on my list. At some point I will get back to Italy and I will do Florence, and I still have not done Rome. So, you know,
oh man,
kind of a major one that I haven't hit yet.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, Ryan, what's yours?
So my Wish You Were Here is in Frankfurt, Germany. Frankfurt has never been my destination, but I have been through that airport many, many times, often with a long layover. When I say long, I mean 8 or 9 hours. And
All right.
the airport itself is huge and not very accommodating or comfortable. So if I have a layover that long, pretty much anything 6 hours or over, I'm leaving the airport. Not just because I'm not a huge fan of the Frankfurt airport itself, but also because it's like, hey, it gets you out of the airport, gets you to get into the country, to kind of experience some things walking around. It's always nice. So there's a lot of real cool things to walk around and do in Frankfurt. But one of the cool things, I think I've talked about at least one of them before.
Yeah, you shared about the Natural History Museum there.
Exactly, which I loved. But this one is a little bit more serious. And Frankfurt has some Holocaust memorial sites. And one of the things that is really cool that I've been to a few times is I think they call it the Holocaust Memorial Wall. And it's just along a street, and it's this big, huge, it's like, I don't know how tall it is, maybe 6 feet, 6.5 feet tall, and it's just, a stone kind of concrete wall, and it's really, really long. And they have these little tiny metal, they're not squares, they're like rectangles, but they're like a rectangle cube. I don't know the name of a rectangle that's a 3D, because it's not a cube, because that's a square. I don't know what you call that. Anyway, a rectangle cube. That's what I'm calling it. Anyway, and they're metal, and they're, I don't know how many, like 4 or 5 deep, like going from the top of the wall down to maybe about like chest height, the lower chest height, depending on how tall you all are, of course. And then it goes down the entire length of the wall, which is like a full slitty block. And on each of them are names of Holocaust victims. And there's just name after name after name after name. And there are, it'll have like, their name, and then I believe the camp that they were at, and then their birth date. And then I think also the day that they died, if they died in one of the camps. And then people will go by and they'll just put, rocks on top of them, sort of as a remembrance of them. And so there's just many, many, many. And one of the ones, and I did find it one of the times I was there, Anne Frank. There's actually a box for Anne Frank and her family as well. So it's definitely somber, and there aren't like a bunch of plaques explaining it. It's not a museum. It's just, down one of the roads. And then like on the other side of the wall is an old Jewish cemetery. And when you go in, it's very, quiet and serene, which is really nice. But you can also see a lot of the headstones and things had been broken and like, vandalized, but that's not like I would think of like with, graffiti or things like that, but just like broken and split apart and kind of destroyed. But there's still pieces there, from the time where, Jews were being, oppressed. But the city of Frankfurt has kind of turned it into a memorial and a remembrance, of that, and to try and, kind of be respectful of all of those, the Jews, who had lost their lives and been impacted by that time in history. So, it's definitely worth going in and looking at, and just to see, you hear numbers, of course, like the number of Jews that died in the Holocaust and things like that. But to have a visual, and this is obviously not all of them, but just to have a visual that kind of goes along with it, I think has an additional impact, and it helps you kind of conceptualize it in a very different sort of a way. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds really powerful.
Yeah. So there it is. It's the Holocaust Memorial Wall in Frankfurt, Germany.
All right.
Okay. I think that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for joining us this week. As I mentioned, we will be continuing this with our packing lists next week. So make sure you tune in for that. Please go ahead and follow us at Timwee Podcast on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. We'll be posting pictures of things, and you can post things to us. You can tag us in images if you wanted to send us that wonderful image of your packing spread and have us give some feedback.
Yes.
We would be happy to do it.
You can also email us at timweepodcast@gmail.com. Send us your travel stories, travel questions, anything you want. That's where we're at.
That's right. You can also call us and leave us a voicemail or send us a text message to 406-763-8699, also known as 406-POD-TIMWEE. Please make sure that if you have not already, you rate and review us on iTunes, as that is a way to help other people find this podcast. Please go ahead and subscribe if you would like to be getting notified every time we post a new episode on Mondays. And if you like the episodes, share them on social media, again, to get the word out. We would really appreciate it.
Thank you, as always, to Beth Reed Miller for our awesome artwork. You can check out more of her artwork at Beth is Something. And thank you to Erica Corbin for her song Round the Globe.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We could not do it without you all. That will be it for this episode. So until next time, take me with you.
Take me with you.
Can we get a sailboat chasing down the sunset as we float round and round the globe? Salty air and balmy nights, guided only by the lights above, and light little love. Oh, the world is out there waiting to explore, and all our troubles here want them